All right, welcome. It's a Monday. What did you do this weekend? Well, up here in Seattle, we're dealing with the little AQI, that stands for Air Quality Index. We went from a beautiful 20 to like 180 last night. We got a little bit of forest fire coming out from our friendly country. But what else did I do? I cleaned up my whole house for a whole day leading up to my birthday party. By the way, August 26th, you're invited to the hybrid birthday party. It is, what is it? Oh, it's this Saturday, August 26th, 7 to 10 p.m. No matter where you are in the world, feel free to click a button and come join me and celebrate my birthday. Speaking of celebrating people, this gentleman, oh my goodness, I have known him for so long. We got a chance to work together when he sent one of his teammates to do a simulation at NASAGA, the North American Simulation and Gaming Association. And overall, last year, I got invited to come work a program with me. He asked me to work a program with him, taking one of his programs and bringing it to life for a client, and it just led to one of my top 10 memories from last year. Let's welcome the CEO of Experience It. Let's welcome the one and only Don Jones. Hey, Don.
Okay, yes. Let's just stop right there. That's fantastic. I think that's the
And
highlight of this interview. I love
and
it. I'm going
that's
to
right.
package
We're out.
that. I'm going to package that, then put it on my website, John. There's no content past it. And a warning sign that says no content past this point. This is it. John's introduction.
That was the only content you needed, right? About Don was that content, and
Yes.
which doesn't even scratch the surface of the iceberg known as Don Jones. Don Jones has 34 years experience. He's one of the two. Why I contacted him, why I wanted to know who he was. He was building experiential simulations, I think, before I was even born. He's been very, very successful at it, working with some of my former employees like Microsoft and many other companies around the world. 78, not even 78 countries, Don, for crying out loud. Don,
Somewhere around there.
Don, do us the favor. For my friends who don't know you like I know you, will you do me a favor and introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah. And as I was saying to you before, that's kind of an existential question, John. And I'm going to take us right into quantum entanglement theory and then come back to Earth. Okay. Is that all right with you?
Always.
I'm just kidding. As if I have the brains to do that, I would get lost in the second galaxy away from the sun. But anyway, hey, you got my name right. It's Don Jones. I started Experience It 34 years ago. Last year, we launched a separate company called Experience It Learning Studios. We can get into why we did that, Learning Studios Limited. And I'm primarily a designer. I'm a writer. I write fiction. I write nonfiction. I prefer to write fiction. I read nonfiction when I'm looking for facts. I read fiction when I'm looking for the truth. And that's the way I design simulations too, because I think sometimes there's more truth in metaphor, there's more truth in story than there is in a list of things that can be objectively proven as facts. And it doesn't mean I'm superficial or we're superficial, or when we work together, John, we're superficial together about facts. We're not. We work really hard on those things. But there is sometimes a deeper truth that facts can sometimes hide. And it's getting at that deeper truth for individuals that I'm really the most still, after 34 years, jazzed about is how do we get at that deeper truth? And so what I do is when I'm not writing narratively, I design simulations, and we're right in the middle of a big design right now.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Don. You know that's the best part. If you haven't figured it out too, that Don will take any subject. I mean, it could be pineapples, it could be kayaking, right? And Don will start diving into it, right, with the depth that only somebody who's really passionate, right? Don, where did this all start? When did you figure out that simulations and meaning was really your business, Don?
Right. Well, I mean, it all started with story. And when I was a kid, I read Sinbad the Sailor, and I said, I can write that.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
You
So
told
I
me that.
started
Sinbad.
writing Sinbad the Sailor, a book like Sinbad the Sailor. You know, our great artists steal from great artists. So, and little kids steal from whoever they can find. So I remember writing that story and saying, well, it's going to be a better story. So rather than two dragons in Sinbad the Sailor, my hero has to slay 150 dragons. And yeah, and rather than, having all these other tools, he's going to have nothing to do it. So for 3 days, I wrote a page a day, and then I gave up on that novel when I was like 10. I said, oh, well, that's 3 days. But honestly, I've always been a story writer right from the beginning. And I've always sat down and wrote stories, and just for myself, for my family, and when I got older, for my kids and that kind of stuff. So I've always been writing, and I've always loved story. And then I started this business with no experience. I was a marketing director for Canada's Olympic teams. That's what I did for a living. That's what I trained for in school. I was an athlete in university, a basketball player, and I was working for the Olympic teams. And I did that for 5 years, and I always wanted to get into learning. And these two women who came in to consult to our organization, our Olympic organization, I really admired them. And I thought, if I could have half their skills, I'd like to do what they're doing. And I thought, okay, I don't have half their skills. I barely have a tenth of their skills. I couldn't speak in public at the time, John. I could play basketball in front of thousands of people,
Wow.
poorly, but I could play.
Yeah.
And I thought, so I quit my job. And I thought, no one's going to hire me. I have no skills. So I'll start my own company. That makes perfect sense. And my first contract was for $80. I still know Paul Kendrick, 34 years later, who gave me that $80. And I don't look at it sincerely any different than when a client now gives us, say, $500,000 to design a simulation. It's the same thing. They're trusting me. I'm going to do my best to deliver more value. And so I invited Paul to our 30th anniversary 4 years ago. And I still value the fact that he took his chance on me to do a workshop for him. But after I learned to master the podium, John, to a very modest extent, I'm not Tony Robbins, but I got better in front of the room, delivering ideas that I care about. I didn't like what came with it. I didn't like feeling like I had all the answers. I was giving them all the answers. So I didn't quite know how to frame that properly. So when I got better at it, I thought, well, I'd like to change the game a little bit. And I'd like to put myself from the stage onto the side and put them in the middle of an experience. And I thought, well, I had no experience doing that, but I was a chess fanatic as a kid. I was an athlete. I liked strategy. I wrote stories. So I thought, I'm going to try this. So I designed my own kind of simulations. And even though I took strategic simulations in business school, I wasn't interested in those. I was interested more in the human side of story and the deep emotions and reasons and psychology of how we work, and how I could help people in any small way by giving them a chance to see their own behavior in a safe environment. And that way I could learn from them and they could learn from each other, and we could all learn together. It wasn't like I had to have all the answers, but I could hold a mirror up to their behavior, like Dr. Phil, and say, how's that working for you? And I as soon as I designed my first simulation, it was called Corp World. It was called Corp World, based after the movie that was way back when, that now has come out as a series.
Really?
And
What's the series called? It's called Corp World?
There's a series that came out recently with that same backstory, and Yul Brynner was in the original one.
Okay.
And I designed my first simulation called Corp World. And after that simulation, I changed my company name. It was 2 years in, from Winning Communication to Business Simulation International, even though I didn't have any clients internationally. And out of my second bedroom, and I started. And then we just built one at a time till we're out where we are right now. And along the way I dropped the name BSI to say, hey, what we're really about is designing experience. And as I said, I launched a new company called Experience at Learning Studios Inc. to really signify a different part of our company, which is really about creating learning hits that are kind of like a movie hit, something that can be used globally, but is that people love. And we're on that, we're trying, John, and you know a little bit about that history around infinity. I can get into that if you'd like. We're trying our best to do that.
Well, one of the things here too is right. Maybe we'll talk about. It's not really stealing. I would like to say like it's influence, right? The fact that you took a
Oh,
story and then
yeah.
changed it, right? That's
Oh,
an
I know.
influence. We were just talking about Canadian bands like Rush, right? They were not stealing, right? They were influencing, and sometimes then after you're influencing, like then you're leading, right? So you really got into this part here too. Like I remember my first client. It was a Barbie Fink at Adobe was my first official corporate client,
Yeah.
and we did a high tech scavenger hunt in Seattle's Discovery Park, beautiful 630-acre park,
Yep. I know
and
it. Yeah.
just really used it to the benefit. It was not just all about fun, right? Barbie really had a specific purpose with that, and so. I mean, somebody, for us as speakers, right, they have given us this part, which is you can either be a sage on the stage
Yeah.
or you can be a guide on the side. And you took this conscious choice, right? I also really look at, again, as team building, we become facilitators, not really speakers, right? We're truly trying to guide an experience. And why I personally think it's so much more powerful is because we never tell anybody anything what to do. They get to draw it themselves
Yeah.
and make their own meaning from it. And I'm pretty sure that maybe that's what attracted you to get off the stage and start creating simulations is because when somebody gets a light bulb going on, right? For me, that's kind of like the high point. Like their own light bulb goes on and they suddenly realize like maybe I should stop talking, maybe I should collaborate more, maybe I should, be a better person. So anyways, I'm kind of curious around that transition around there from speaker to facilitator. What helped you, or what were some of the maybe even falling points? Because I know I failed
Yeah.
once to get there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, 34 years. There's a couple of client engagements I'd love to take back, And I always say that I'm trying to build my relationships over 34 years such that if I run into them in the grocery store, they won't hide behind the vegetables. You know what I mean? That
No,
we
I know
just
totally.
that we stay in conversation. I've launched that newsletter lately, John, and it's called In Conversation. And one of
Oh,
the
I
things
read it. Great.
yeah, and one of the things I really value the most is the conversations I've had with you, with clients, with partners, with learners,
Yes.
because I've always learned so much, and it doesn't have to be quote unquote on topic, because everything is on topic if you're dealing with humans. It's everything is on topic. And I love the fact when I can go down paths with people that I didn't think about, but that I'm enjoying, like the time you took me on that kayak trip that we were talking about. And I
Uh,
thought, no, I don't have time. And then we went on and had the best
Yeah,
time.
let me give a side story to this. So we're working this event last year, and we luckily got ahead enough because we got on site early, with all the flight challenges and everything else. And so everything was set. There was nothing left for us to do. We're all prepped. And I said, we met the guy who was the owner, and it was a really cool story. The owner like bought this kayak company when in COVID, when it was failing, and he turned it into something really successful. So the owner takes us out, and again, Don says, "I said I want to go kayaking, right?" And the other guy we're with, Rob, says, "Oh yeah, I want to go too." And Don's like, "I own a kayak here in my beautiful Nova
I
Scotia."
didn't say it like that. I didn't say it like that.
I know
Yeah.
I'm dramatizing. But he's just like, right. I think I'm good, right? And then I said to Don about this. I gave him the reframe, and the reframe says, "Don, this is not about the kayak, right? This is about the people," and that's what got him. Like that's what got him. And then the three of us got on here. The one piece I really want to highlight, besides the dolphin that jumped through the water, as soon as we got in the water, right, we get out there, and I don't know this about Don. Don loves geology. Right now, if you know, like you heard him a little bit, like he loves like the thinking of the what's happening for millions of years and what's the minerals doing, what's the patterns, what all the things, the memories that have all there. Anyway, so we get to this part, and the guy's a geology expert who's the owner of this company, and he takes us on this extended tour of this other place where he shows we get off of the kayaks and walk around all these rocks that they're less protected, so we can like really walk around it, and I could see Don light up. That was the best part was that I saw Don light up. Don, what else do you have to share about that guy?
Well, first of all, it was just a thank you for reminding me that it wasn't about the kayaks. It was just us hanging out together. And that made the day. And yes, I love the rocks too and the story behind all that. But I like you said, I liked us just hanging out together. That was the best part for sure. But going back to that, why I'm fascinated by geology and that, and weaving it back into what we're talking about and where learning's going and where we're at in learning. One of the things I love about looking back in history is that we've changed our environment, a lot, of course, but we haven't changed a lot.
Ooh.
If we go back to our early ancestors, you know what they wanted? They wanted a family that was close to them. They wanted protection from the cold and from the predators that would eat them. They wanted food on the table for the kids that they were raising, and they wanted them to have a little bit better cave or dwelling than they have, and they were willing to sacrifice for those things to make that happen. And I was joking earlier with you about quantum entanglement theory and all that, but what I enjoy about those kinds of conversations is, the idea of quantum entanglement theory is that a photon can be changed at its origin, and 14 miles away, that photon that was split in half will act in the same behavior as the half that you just changed here. They are entangled, they are meshed. And in the same way, when your partner, John, or my partner, Kimi, sometimes she'll finish my sentences. She woke up the other day dreaming about private schools, which we never talk about. We're past that stage with our kids.
Yeah.
And I had been just thinking about and Googling about private schools for some strange reason. But in some ways you go, well, that's bizarre. What are the odds? But after you've been with someone for a long, long time, you realize the odds aren't that long. You do finish your sentences. You do sort of start thinking in the same way. And why am I saying this? Because at the profound middle of who we are is we are entangled. We are coupled. We are part of this entity called the human race. And we need each other, and we know it on some level. We know it, and so at the core of design of what we're doing, I think one of the two of the key principles for me, the things that I care deeply about, one is to recognize that is the connection people need with each other, even if they don't say they need it. They need it, and then secondly is to have a humbleness in our craft about learning theory. You've talked to neurosurgeons, probably. You've talked to surgeons, brain scientists. I've talked to people. I've interviewed people like that are deeply spend their whole life studying the brain or operating on it successfully, hopefully. And but they're humbled by what they know truly about the brain, because most of it they don't really understand about how it works. Yet
Right.
when we sometimes talk about our own learning theories, adult, child, whatever, we talk about them as if they're intact, as if they're complete, like we know when the penny drops. And I think it's really, really, really useful. Let's just say really useful, less redundant.
No, it's really
But
useful. You need to know
really, really, really useful. How's that for articulate? What
Yeah.
a speaker. He uses half of his time to say the same word over and over and over again. And he thinks that's going to make it more relevant. But I think it's really useful if we step back a bit and say we don't really know completely when the penny drops. So yes, our theories still can be useful. We can say that's directionally, we believe directionally this is right, but less arrogant about that we're absolutely right. Why? So we can leave space for the learner to take it in directions we never imagined. And
Right.
we could never know. And
Yeah.
we may even not know after they leave. but just to leave space for somebody else's design, every one of the learners. And if we can just humble ourselves in the face of this magnificent creature called a human,
Yeah.
we don't know how you learn completely, but we want to provide an environment that, engages you and pulls you in, and then you take it from there. That's what got me into this side of the business. And you know what, John? When I first got into the business, I was designing metaphoric simulations pretty much, not
Yeah.
always, but a lot. And I still love designing those. I design quote unquote realistic ones. But I remember someone saying, well, that's not realistic, it's metaphoric. And in the beginning, I was a little intimidated by that. And then I realized, and it's not my quote that says, you go to nonfiction for facts, but you go to fiction for the truth. And the truth is in the invisible connections. If you can design something that has invisible connections that are real for the participant, that's way more real than a simulation that looks like it has all the business assets, the forms, the looks, the jobs, the responsibilities, but doesn't have the true engaged, intimate, invisible connections between those things. And I was always more interested in those connections than I
Right.
was in the boxes.
Well, this leads to I mean, I'll just I'm talking about humbled, right? I'll talk about my mom. She ended up getting acoustic neuroma, right, which is a benign tumor but grows in your ear cavity, and it got so big it touched one of her brain, one of the spinal cord, and that's when it really became a big problem. And so she went through a whole series of neurosurgeons. We're talking about the best in the world, Don. We're talking Stanford, right? And there's two parts. One is, it's amazing that they were able to take care of her so she had another 15 years of life. Okay.
Oh,
And there's the second part, which is they kind of don't know what's going on, right? There are lots of things that they have to do to try, and they don't know until they get a reaction later, because there's still so much unmapped space in your brain, so much unmapped about how do we know. And I do love this part, right, where you just say, we leave space for learners. Right. When you leave space for learners, I think that's where they get their, this is the one challenge that continues in L&D, is that every learner technically is different.
yes.
Right. There's never another Don Jones. There's never another John Chen. Right. And so things are like those were given by my mom. Right. Like she always told me when I was growing up, there will never be another John Chen. There'll never, ever be a person exactly like John Chen. And I thought that was really cool. There's, other things that I picked up from my mom were like we make up words all the time. Right. Right. Like it's not it's not the Mojave Desert, it's the Mojave Desert, right? When in my house, right? So these are things that I've like picked up from my mom, and I have to carry forward. They were never by the way, like we're using air conditioners, right? No. She always called it an Escheler when we were growing it up. So these are like these small like acoustic things that I don't know that I have with me that I kind of carry forward with me. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Well, first of all, hey, John, I'm super happy. Those brilliant people gave your mom those 15 years with you and you with her. I mean, isn't that a gift?
It was such a gift, and at least the one part too is sometimes when you touch on brain things, their personalities change, and sometimes people get angry. Well, what was great was my mom actually got happier.
Oh,
She
wow.
laughed at everything, like she just enjoyed, and so for all you who are listening out here too, by the way, right? Every day you're training your brain for something. And my mom at least was always on that positive. She was a nurse. She was on the positive side. She was on the helpful side. To the day she died, she was always thinking about how can I help somebody? How can I make somebody laugh? And so when brain lost some of its function, the stuff that was left was the stuff that made her happy.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful story, John. I'm glad you shared that with me. I'm going to share you a story with you, a story about my mom.
Oh,
And if you hang out with me too much, you've probably heard stories about my mom, but my mom is 96. She still lives on her own. She has 6 of my siblings pretty close to her. I'm an hour down the road. And we were talking about a medically assisted death. And she's always talked about dying, not in a morbid way, but in a way I think that's preparing us for the kids. Like, don't worry about when I go. She goes, I just don't want to be around when you go. That's the order of things. So she was preparing us for her death. And she said she didn't believe in it, medically assisted death, dying. And I said, well, Mom, I do. If I was in great pain, I would ask Akimi to, help me with that, get a doctor to help me with that if that was towards the end of my life. And her friend was going to have that right away. And she would never advise her friend, because she would never get in her way, because she loves her friend, do what she needs to do, but she doesn't believe it for herself. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I said, well, Kimi and I were talking about that the other day, and the doctor that we were talking to gave us a number of methods to do it. And Akimi chose one for me. And I said, could I see what that is? And it was down at the bottom of the list, and it said, wife with pillow. It's a joke, John. It's a joke, John. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, Akimi, what's going on? And she's like, I'm practicing, Don. I'm practicing. So my 96-year-old mother thought that was pretty funny. But listen, our mothers have given you and me so much. And they're just amazing. But here's something that you said, John, that I do want to pick up on. And it's what we're most dedicated to right now. And you said it. And our words for it are learning engagement at scale. So send the same program out to 1,000 people. How can you have that feel like that individual experience is top notch? Like, if you go in a classroom, there's 30 people there, because of your skills of facilitating and engaging people, you can elevate that class for engagement for 30 people. But it's very difficult to do that for 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. And so we've spent the last few years, not all successfully, but a lot of, at least $2 million, a huge amount of effort of only dedicated to design. And part of that is Infinity that we talked about, and I can get into that if it's useful. And part of that is the evolution of that into something called a town called Hope, and that we're soft launching in September. So learning engagement at scale, I think, is the number one problem of virtual learning in our time. And if you crack that, and if you can't crack that, everything else falls down. It doesn't matter if you're evaluating them, how you evaluate, everything else breaks down. Learner engagement at scale is the foundation point of where we're at. So we think we're making progress on that.
Well, you had this big article, Going Human in a Digital World, right? And I talking about a digital world, right? You've never seen anything in our lifetime, like in the last 3 years, about having the digital world finally explode, like, because again, people, it was there. The technology was all there. People didn't want to do it. And then they had to do it. And then they discovered all the stuff that they didn't know. And so I'd really love to hear, what does going human in a digital world mean to you? What has to happen for Don Jones to really be engaged, right? Learner engagement in a virtual setting, and share a little bit more about where Infinity and your next simulation is going. So I gave you a lot there, so whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Yes, you did, but it's great, and I appreciate it. I'll answer it in two ways. First, going human in a digital world is really all about the fact that, the World Economic Forum still says that we're in the fourth or fifth wave of the Industrial Revolution. I think it's lazy, and I think it's also harmful because of the way they influence CEOs all over the world. We're not in the fourth or fifth wave of the Industrial Revolution. The models and principles and processes of the Industrial Revolution have died a few waves ago, and now they're actually getting in the way. We're in a human revolution, and we don't even know it yet. So, as you know, John, most of the digital transformations fail, actually, the big ones. And I was in a company, I won't name the company, spent $2 billion on their digital transformation. It was lost. The whole thing was lost. And why? Was it because of the technology? No. It was because they diminished the value of the people who didn't get a chance to have a choice in it, and who didn't get to play a part in selecting the way it was going to be used. So they minimized the the carbon-based units who come in and walk out every day, and they over glamatize the technology. And there's two things we found in, say, 200 plus thousand leaders going through our simulations. Here's the patterns. You read it in the newsletter. But the first pattern is people are context blind. And we know that. Everything in our profession, yours and mine, is about getting people to work together outside of their silos. And they're context blind. That can be trained for, and people can learn to do it better. And we try to do that. The second thing is they overvalue a technology solution, even though we love technology. You love technology.
I love it.
We use it. We'll be using ChatGPT, and we are using ChatGPT. We'll be using AI in our simulations, but it's human digital partnerships in that order. And here's the story that goes along with the article that was in Duke Corporate Dialogue magazine. You might have heard the story, John, but a lady's coming back to her apartment, walks up to the second floor, and it's outside. She's going to get in the apartment. She sees her neighbor, Bill, who's way down the other end of the hallway on his hands and knees looking for something. And she goes, Bill, what are you looking for? He goes, oh, I dropped my key. I'm looking for the key. And she says, well, Bill, where did you drop the key? He says, oh, back by the door where you are, by his door, which is right next to hers. And she goes, well, why are you looking all the way down there? He said, because the light's better down here. Well, I think that's where we are with technology, right, John? If you go to the tech show in Las Vegas, the light is all there. The money, the hype, the press. Now, if you walk out the door, and I've done the math in terms of how long it would take you to walk. If you walked out a side door from that show, and I would like that show, I would enjoy it. I'd have fun for a while there anyway. But if you went out the side door, walked 15 minutes, you're in the worst district, second worst district for public schools in the United States. And if you sat at the back of one of those classrooms, you'd see little Jose and little Rebecca looking out the window in an underserviced classroom that doesn't have enough resources. And Rebecca and Jose have more in their brains than any technology 15 minutes away that's getting all the hype. And they will have that for life, for 80 years. They don't go obsolete in 4 or 5 years. They keep learning, and it's not true. I was about to say bullshit, but I won't say that. It's untrue that they get older and slower and dumber. They don't. They change. Their brain gets more integrated. There's more unicorns that come out of 40-year-olds than 20-year-olds. I mean, there's nothing wrong with youth. It's amazing, but don't overestimate and don't underestimate what's happening to the little Mary and little Jose over 80 years, and to waste our resources on everything tech and nothing about the most complex system that we know in the universe, which is in little Jose's brain. That little boy, that little girl looking out the window, bored in an underfunded school. It's a crime, and it's a crime. We are in a human revolution. We don't know it yet. We're not willing to bet on it yet, but the future is human. And yes, leverage technology. It's amazing, but leverage it in that order. So, that's what I mean by a human digital revolution. And if I take it back to our learning now, what we're trying to do, what we simply said is, learning engagement at scale. Okay, it sounds super hard to do. It is super hard to do. Our whole industry is trying, in their own way, trying to do it, or not trying to do it and just sending out stuff and saying that's good enough. But I was on a call with MIT, Stanford, a few out of the big schools that were talking about their massive open online courses, right? And I said, oh, it's amazing. You have this many people signed up. How many people finished the course? You know what the number is?
Is it low? It's got to be low.
It's like, if it's not in double digits, I think it's 8 to 10, maybe 9. And I said, well, why is that? And you know what the answer was? They said, well, people are busy. They've got other interests, which are all true. But as soon as an industry starts blaming the consumer for not using its product, it's ripe for disruption.
Yeah, this is like a movie, right? Like, well, you see YouTube statistics. Like, a lot of people only watch the first 30 seconds or 60 seconds of a video, but a movie is such a well composed piece. I mean, how many people walk out of a movie early, right? Less
Well,
than
this is
single digits.
you're going right down my path. So I said, there's something wrong here because the future of virtual learning is design.
It's got to
It's
be engaging enough to keep you pulling
yes,
along to get to the end of the
and
lesson.
it's look at the resources. So this is why I started learning experience at Learning Studios Inc. with a different business model, and the business model is this: like we can't throw $300 million at an hour and a half or 3 hour entertainment
Yeah.
piece like Avatar can. But why can Avatar do it? They can do it because they sell it for reasonably priced tickets that I can afford, $15, and go watch it and
Yes.
go, oh my God, this is amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So, but our business, our industry is going to go that way, where companies like mine, Experience at Learning Studios Inc., will spend a couple of $1 million on a 45-minute piece of learning for you. And so where will it pay off? Well, it'll pay off because we'll sell it for reasonable licenses. So that's the hope with what we're calling a town called Hope.
And let's go with the other piece, Don. How many people walk out of a simulation once they start?
Yeah.
For a variety
Some
of
do.
reasons. One is your boss is usually in the room, but the number two is, you want to play the game to the end. I'm just saying the number of people that have rage quitted out of my geo teaming event is like less than like 0.001%. Like once they start,
That's
they,
right.
they get into it, and that's the cool part I think about a simulation. I've never thought about the value of it this way though. I have almost 100% completion in a team building event.
Exactly. Now, here's another angle on this, John.
Yeah.
So, and I write about this called The Last Mile of Learning. It's in a
Yeah.
white paper on my website. And the last mile of learning is this. So my wife's originally Japanese. She went to school in Boston and then lived here, the rest of her life. But if I send a package from here to Tokyo, the majority of the cost of that package isn't in the flight costs, the burning of fuel. It's in the takeoff and deliveries and all the handoffs before that to get it in and out, to get it into the neighborhood, to knock on someone's door, to come back the next day, to leave a note, to have someone answering the phone. That's where the costs are, at the beginning and end of that transaction. Well, what I think digital learning got wrong when it first came out, and this was going to be the great big thing, is they got the pipelines right, and they didn't think of anything about the both ends of that. So they were just they were just pushing content out. And you say, well, what has to be done better? They have to spend the resources to design something so amazing. And a movie, I loved Parasite, the movie that came from
Korea.
South Korea.
Oh yeah.
Incredibly well-written movie,
Yes.
incredibly well-acted movie.
Yes.
I hardly moved from my seat the entire time I watched that movie. Now, I'm not North Korean or South Korean. That came to me because it was a well-told story that was universal. And it could touch anybody. It could touch the little pasty-faced redhead from Nova Scotia. It could touch everybody all over the world. So saying one design can't touch a lot of people uniquely is simply saying you haven't created the right design. You haven't dug deep enough to touch people beyond their cultural facade. And that's not a minor thing. That's not a superficial thing. A cultural thing is wonderful. But beneath that, their humanity is shared. And when a story touches you,
Yes.
yes, the writer was from South Korea. Yes, the actors were from South Korea, but their heart, their sinews, their blood, it was the same as mine. And I could feel it.
Yeah.
And so in our profession, I just want to try to take experience at Learning Studios down that same path. So we have spent $2 million
Yes.
on about 45-minute hour of your experience called A Town Called Hope. And it's about a town that the industries have all left, and left the people there.
Oh, it sounds
And
like Boeing.
Dora
It sounds like
Taylor,
Seattle. It sounds like
great,
Seattle when
great.
Boeing, right, killed the town. Like,
Well, I use that line because actually, John, I use the line on the poster going out of town. It says,
That's a great
last one
line.
out, turn off the lights. I use that in A Town Called Hope. because I learned that when I was down in Seattle,
Right,
right? With
right,
bone.
right.
But in this town, Laura Taylor, the great great granddaughter of Frederick Winslow Taylor, says, I'm going to move my company there and we're going to redefine our space
Yep,
and we're going to hire all these people from Hope
yep.
to take this company forward. But she runs into a bunch more trouble than she anticipates and has to define the future of the way she's going to lead in order to win. So we believe you can build stories that are universal
Yes.
and so deep and powerful to get under the skin of your participants about universal behaviors we all need to see.
Well, let me share this too, right? So first off, I think you know that ATD and the Association of Talent Development, one of the largest training conferences in the world, that Korea has a massive presence. They used to send
Oh,
like 3,000, like one third of the attendees were from Korea. So
oh
and
my
then the flip
God.
side of this, if you didn't hear this stat, Don, over 40% of Netflix viewers have viewed at least one Korean show or more.
Well,
So
they are
that's like,
so talented.
right?
They are producing
If you
such
haven't watched Extraordinary Attorney Woo, that's like our latest in the South Korean. You gotta watch this part about an
oh,
autistic lawyer.
I will. And if I a shout out to one of your American talents, Quentin Tarantino,
Oh yeah.
because he was one of the guys who sponsored early on the director, that famous director, I forget his
Oh,
name, who did Parasite. So
ooh, I didn't know that.
it takes a family, right? It takes a
Oh yeah.
family to nurture talent, and that guy gave a shout out to Quentin Tarantino. So isn't
Oh,
that wonderful? And then they're producing such top quality things.
they are.
So I think we're on the cusp of realizing we need to do these things better. We need to
Yes.
invest, but we need to find the business model to make that pay off. And the business model now is we don't have theaters for distribution, but we have this. We have unlimited distribution for our digital simulations anywhere in the world. So build top quality stuff, then build the pipeline. The pipelines are easy now. It's not about
Yes.
saying we can
Everyone
reach.
could be a television station now, right?
Yeah. And it's not enough to say, hey, we could reach 10 million people. It's
Yeah.
not reach, it's touch.
Oh, that's a good one. It's not reach. It's okay. Speaking of reach and touch, then, Don, if people listen to this interview, what is the one thing you want them to remember from this interview?
Yeah. Well, you know what I think is beautiful about our profession, John,
What's that, Don?
is that, I mean, we're all striving to help people. I mean, we're all in this business to go, listen, I'll tell you, I had a little vision in my head when I started this business without knowing what I was doing at all. But I knew I wanted to get into learning. I wasn't a great student. I was a very average student. And but when I got into this profession, here's the image that came to mind. And it popped into my mind and it stayed here for 34 years. And it's going to sound funny, but it's this cowboy. I've never been a cowboy. I don't wear cowboy hats. I don't wear cowboy boots. And it's a cowboy, this long, lean cowboy, and he's sitting in like a $20 motel, which honestly is the kind of motel when Boeing called me to come down and pitch them the first time. I stayed in a $20 motel not far from Boeing. And they, at the end of it, they said, hey, we don't want to see anybody else. We're going to hire your company. Do you want us to drive you back to the hotel? And I said, no. I'll drop me off at the mall because I want to buy my wife a present, you know. But anyway, this cowboy is sitting in a $20 motel and he's got the curtains closed and it's dark and he's got his feet up on a coffee table and there's a half bottle of beer on the coffee table. And I don't think he's drunk, but it's sitting there and he's slumped over. He's slumped over and he's feeling dejected. And I don't know why. And but he's just bummed out. I felt like that where I thought, oh fuck, how can I? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Oh shoot, darn,
Oh,
gosh
darn. Look
darn,
at the
Mrs.
Canadian in you.
Cleaver, gosh darn, Mrs. Cleaver, I'm feeling really bummed out today. That's okay, Donnie. But anyway, I felt that way in my life. Most people have, where they just feel like, I don't know if I can get up tomorrow and face the world again. And, you know, for whatever reason, and it could be as, you know, who knows what it is, but he's slumped over. I feel like I've gotten this profession to get them up off that couch. It looks like a frat house couch, to go over to that window and take those curtains and open them up. And it's noon, and it's these rolling hills, green hills, and he's kind of has to go like this to his eyes because he's been in his dark room all morning. And he goes, maybe I can, ... John, I don't even care what it is. Go find a girlfriend, go find a boyfriend, make a transition if you want to make a transition. Go start a new career. It doesn't matter to me as long as it's something that fulfills you and you're contributing to society. I want to be an aid to that. And even though that was the naive way I got into my profession, now we're doing more quote unquote sophisticated things for leaders and big companies. But at the heart of it, I don't talk like this with them, but underneath it all, they're human and they need to be touched. They need to realize that, none of them need to be fixed. These are successful people, but they need to remember some things about themselves and their potential to do some things that are really important to them and to those around them. And the complexity of that and humbling ourselves to what we know and don't know, I think is the thing that I would want people to take most away from this conversation.
Don, thank you.
The fact that you invited me on a really nice kayak trip.
Don, thank you so much for your amazing time. I can't wait. I hope I get a chance to pre-play or pre-test your new simulations.
I'm going to send it to you. I will. When we test it, I will send it to you for sure.
I'm always here, and I can't wait. One day I'm going to make it all the way up into Canada, right, and come visit you, Don. Thank you so much.
Nova Scotia, buddy. We've got a room here for you, so you can stay with us. No problem.
Thank you so much. All right, this is John. This is John Chen. We just had this amazing conversation with Experience It founder Don Jones from Experience It. Meanwhile, on the here, you want to find out more of these, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.online to go see the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. Subscribe on your favorite platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, or the other 11 platforms. We hope you enjoyed this. You want to be the next guest, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, and you can be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. We'll see you next time.
Always start people and keep people. Show you got heart.